Hey everyone, it's Maureen. You are coming to, well, you're seeing my dining room table, and we're doing a thing. Sneaky peeky for the next upcoming project that's currently in research terms. Fancy. But this is my research binder. I have several of them. When I figure out a project that I really want to work on and take a deep historical dive into, I buy a binder. I buy a whole bunch of these plastic sleeves, and then I print out as many available pictures as I can find of a particular item. Normally it's a museum quality item, and sometimes there's only a handful of pictures available. And if it hasn't been photographed in a while, some of those pictures are in black and white, believe it or not. This particular project is. So let me go back here. As you can tell, I've been working on this probably for about a month. All right. Let's start at the beginning. So, this is the object, and I'm going to turn this if I can. Maybe this will make it a little easier to look at. There we go. Oh, there we go. This is a lady's embroidered waistcoat from 1650. It's currently housed in the Victoria and Albert Museum. The folks that allow you to look at extant pieces of clothing, because this would be one that exists from the early 17th century, that department of the V&A unfortunately is closed right now. Because, you know, if you do get to see an item, they will let you kind of photograph it. Which, if you're trying to recreate a item, or even just look at the embroidery motifs itself, is really kind of useful. So, basically, this item, and what I have found out, so this is the front of it. And then, this is the back. I am catching some light here, so bear with me, folks. I'm going to turn it this way. There we go. I have all my notes written. This lady's embroidered waistcoat is a little different than the ones that you see that are silk embroidered on very fine linen. This waistcoat is made of linsey woolsey, which is a linen warp and a wool weft. So the warp is the vertical threads, the weft is the horizontal. And that makes this fabric stiff. That type of fabric is still produced as inner lining for men's suits modernly. So I was actually able to obtain some linsey woolsey fabric, and I am waiting for the embroidery thread to come in at this point in time before I start recreating it. What I'm doing over there with the very simple line drawings is, you see all these very intricate motifs. This was made in 1630. They dated it based on the kind of embroidery that they were seeing. Instead of it having a swirly, viney-like quality like the late 16th century ladies' waistcoats had, this is that transitional piece from 16th century embroidery into Jacobean embroidery. Because actually, this is not a bad resolution image. You can kind of really see, like, you have a lily, This is a pear, there's a butterfly. So you have animals as well as plants. A lot of the 16th century coats just had insects like caterpillars and butterflies, but we actually have a kitty cat and several other, there's like a hawk right here, like a cockatrice, so a fancy-tailed bird, several kinds of, there's a rabbit. So several different kinds of animals in this particular item. Reading up on this item on the V&A website, basically they had said that the waistcoat was made in 1630. Here's a shot of the cockatrice, so that very fancy bird. And literally this spot right here, that is all that is written about this waistcoat. That is it. But what they've determined by having it in their collection is that it was made to fit someone else. This isn't the original 1630s pattern that you see right there. That's what it turned into eventually. So you get this really nice line drawing, and they're just kind of placing motifs to kind of show you how it works. But it's a little blurry for you to read, but I'm going to read it to you. It says, the mythical bird is just one of the delightful creatures that populate an embroidered jacket of the 1630s, worked in red wool on a thick twill, linen warp, and cotton weft. The coarseness of the thread and the heaviness of the ground fabric lack the delicacy of similar garments embroidered in silk on finer linen, but overall the work has a certain enchanting vitality. The design shows a development in later Jacobean needlework. The scrolling vines seen on jackets of the first 2 decades of the 17th century have disappeared. Each motif is worked separately while retaining the curvilinear rhythmic typically found in Jacobean embroidery during the later 17th century. This type of needlework, known as crewel work, grew in popularity, became a principal method of decorating household furnishings, particularly bed curtains and valances, and a number of contemporary alterations to the front and sleeves of the jacket have been made. And then T326 1982, that's the one up above. The item number was cut off here, but I do actually have the item number. T124 1938 is what this particular item is. But that's all there is that's written as far as in a published book. That's all that there is that's written about the waistcoat. And for what I end up doing as an artist with a love of history is taking an item that is in one of these wonderful museums and researching it, recreating it, and then publishing what my findings are with trying to recreate it in a modern sense using the period techniques, and while still trying to faithfully recreate the item from the period. So based with what I had from earlier, I drew up the drawing that they had, but I drew what the back would look like, because based on the waistcoat image, there was not a triangular, you could call it a gusset, but they called them godets, these guys right here. There wasn't one in the back. Some of the late 16th century waistcoats had one, but everyone was different, and there's a wonderful person who had sort of done a survey of the ones that were the late 16th century, and that gave me some good basis to work on this early 17th century one. So came up with an idea of what it would look like in the back. relatively what the possible pattern pieces were. Now this is what the modern piece relatively, you know, because these are not to scale. So a godet would end up just being basically a triangular shape that would fit into these slits right here on the body of the piece, you know, based on the natural waist. The back panel was one solid panel, there wasn't a split. These are the front pieces that were added on later, and a general idea of the full sleeve and what it would look like is what I have so far. I want to make the waistcoat as it was in 1630, and there happens to be another one that is not been refashioned that is available in a different book, and that's how I was able to get the pattern piece idea already laid out without even having seen the item, which I won't unfortunately be able to do when I do travel overseas. But here is the fabric that I had purchased. I'm probably going to bleach it a little bit, so I will wash this up, pre-shrink it, and then go ahead, because I have like 3 yards of it, and then go ahead and start embroidering panels, basically. I have yet to get the embroidery thread, which will be over here. But I do have some linen thread, so I have it in a white, I have it in a natural, and I'm sort of go through what the general ideas on the construction of it. So basically, so far we have the garment pattern relatively, we have the materials, and then I was going through, and this is what I'm currently working on the process, was figuring out how many separate motifs happened in here as far as animals and insects. And there ends up being 9 different items, and there's like 2 different kinds of caterpillars. I think they were stuck in when they could be stuck in, basically. But if they were facing you, I included that kind of thing. If they were in profile, I put that in there. And then basically there are really good pictures. Not all of them are like this though, but there are really good pictures of most of the motifs. So what I'm going to do is basically go through with all the images I have, do a simple line drawing to figure out the stitches, but you know, also have the reference picture with it. So I'm only part way in at this point in time. And these are not to scale because obviously these are blown up. They're really big. So figuring out what the scale is the next challenge when I finish what the embroidery pattern is going to be. So we're currently working on the bunny. There's the bunny. So cute. We have a moth. This reminds me of like a Luna moth almost. We have a kitty cat. You can't go wrong with a kitty cat on a waistcoat. Got like spots too. It's really neat. But they're using the same stitches on working each individual motif. That's what I find really to be fascinating, is just that they're all done very similarly, which means that me taking the time to actually embroider, those are the 2 different caterpillars. These are the heads. The heads are towards you. So notice that he's a little thinner, he's a little chunkier, and he has stripes, which end up having a different kind of texture worked in it, versus this fellow is just all one texture. So there is some variations in here. There's a squirrel. There's a couple different squirrels. They're worked very similarly. The clear pages in between are when I draw these up, like you're seeing earlier. And there's a fly. And I found another picture of the fly. So trying to kind of still capture because sometimes when you blow these up, they do get a little blurry. I do have an email out to the curator to see if maybe he can get me a few of the other high resolution ones, if they are so kind. They are in the middle of a move. I understand that they're busy. You know, if they can, great. If not, I have pictures to make do with. And this is the embroidery plants and fruit portion, which we basically have also 9 items here. There's a mystery flower, and I'm going to point it out to you, that I can't identify what it is, and I have looked. So this is a rose, sort of in profile, and I could kind of tell botanically, you know, based on the leaf. We have like a little rose hip or a bud here. But I could kind of say, okay, that's a rose. This is a pansy, or also known as a viola. There's another bunny. So, and here's one of the flies. So it's interesting because when you look at the different patterns and where the elements are placed, the motifs, they all repeat in a similar way. So it's finding that pattern. And my friend Elizabeth Salisbury out of Texas, actually, but an SCA person that I've known for a long time, has made her own version of a late 16th century ladies' waistcoat. Was helping me. We took a deep dive on a phone call and really were like, okay, you know, this should repeat. And she was able to point out to me how it repeats, which is really interesting. This looks like it is some sort of, what would you call it, a bulb, because this is an iris up here. So basically with these all flowering, I was able to identify how the petals were arranged as to what flower it more likely was representing. And the funny bit is, I have found, because this jacket's been cut down and resized to fit somebody else, some of these motifs were used in part in some places, and they don't always match up where they're supposed to match up. So it does make one wonder. This one's a lily, because you can see the stamens in here, the arrangement of the petals. There's like 5 of them showing here. It's some sort of berry-like item here down at the nodes. I'm trying to figure out if that's an exaggeration, but it's cut off, like there's no bulbing body here. But you have these beautiful like feather stitches in some of the leaves that just are beautiful filler. And I'm just hoping with the wool I'm able to really get that texture without it getting too fuzzy. That's the tricky part. Here's another, this is the same lily. No, this is the iris, actually. But it's blown up a little bit from the earlier picture. And this is a pear, I believe. I had to go into a couple Elizabethan embroidery flower books that I own to figure out what is what. Here's where the squirrel is again. And here's a bunny, here's a butterfly. So it's interesting how you'll see them sort of just appear. Here's the top of the rose. Here's one of the fancier caterpillars, back end of the cat, the moth. And this one I believe is a fig, is my guess. Because it ends up being, it looks like a definite fruit of some form where the flower is finished. There's no petals, and that these are going to create some sort of fruit. A tulip, which were very popular in the 17th century. So it was nice to see this represented in embroidery. And yet again, you know, more kind of feathery stitches. Some places have been worn away a little bit because this stopping abruptly doesn't make a lot of sense. So You know, the jacket is in, it's not in the regular collection. Normally the items that are very fragile, they don't have out on display, because even having a clothing piece on a mannequin causes wear, even if it's not a physical person wearing the item. But remember how I had talked about on the iris? I wonder if this is the bottom part of it, because it looks cut off, and here's a seam. So sometimes it'll repeat in odd ways, and like here's the bottom portion of the hawk. Yeah, they had to carefully try to, when they repieced this, I have yet, of course, to write anything back here because I'm still working on it, but I also have a spot for references because it's going to take me a while to do this project. But this has been what I've been up to, and I still have the dolls in my sewing bag, so I haven't gotten them really started yet. And if you are a follower of this channel, you will know I have multiple projects going on at one time. One of the other things that I'm doing besides slowly working on the research of this is I'm spinning wool so I can weave up a whole bunch on my new loom that's downstairs. I've had that now for about a year and I haven't gotten to do a project on it. But I do my weaving in the winter. But I'm hoping we can get a few more really high quality images like this, but I can, you know, yet again, use the edges of these images to really hone in on some of these like texture pieces. You know, here, yet again, here's the seam that when this was redone, you know, we're cutting off motifs. They tried to work in between motifs if they could. I was seeing partial plants and less so partial animals. Like they tried, you know, you can tell that they tried to really be careful when they were working on this. But as far as a update, that's about all that I have been doing at this point in time. With my last live video, still working through a whole bunch of family related things at this point in time, and that takes, it always takes time going through a loved one's belongings and things. So I luckily have another sibling that's going through all of those individual items and working on that, and I help out when I can. But here's another good one of the, I don't know if we can see it, but yeah, it's up better down here. This is one of the other fancier caterpillars. So even though we have our butterfly over here, here's our seam yet again where it was worked. And then up here is, I think this is near the underarm because that's where the sleeve would be. So this might be on the back. I'm not 100% sure. Could be back or front possibly. But, you know, yet again, I can use this. I'll put both caterpillars on their own paper. Like, I didn't want to put the caterpillar on here with the butterfly, even though they're on the same or near the same area. I will put the caterpillar, the two different kinds of caterpillars, I'm going to put them on their own motif page. So, but I am excited to get started on this. I have some new scroll frames for now, so I can start embroidering a waistcoat. Now granted, to practice, because I want to get really good at my stitches over time, I'm going to create a practice piece. I'm not going to dive right into the panels of the waistcoat. I'm going to make a coif, which I have done before, to allow me to test the pattern and figure out placement of the individual motifs. So here to come find out in my conversations with my friend about these waistcoats. Sometimes they would mess up, move a motif, and you would see the outline of where the prior motif was placed. It doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. So these were not made picture perfect. We get hung up on recreation clothing being that it has to be perfect, like it was made by a machine. These were people making these items all by hand. There is some wool tape around the sleeves. There's some striped linen tape. It's not lined, but I am going, for the item I'm creating, I will line it because I will be wearing it. There's one of those mystery flowers. There's a lily. There's a squirrel. Here's a cat. Oh, he's quite worn, but if you think about it, it's probably from the sleeve movement or wearing a belt. See? There's some wear there. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of possibility. So I hope that you and yours will have a very merry winter holiday season. And I will be posting videos as I work on this project. It's not going to be a complete how-to from beginning to end. I don't really have that kind of time for filming. I wish I did, but I don't get to do this as a full-time job, and that's all right. I still get to share really awesome stuff with you anyway. And if I do any of the other like doll projects, because I'm still in the planning stages as to the clothing for the dolls at this point, I have yet to assemble them, but that's an easy part. And there are videos on the channel as to how to make the doll bodies. In that case, I have created that kind of video out there already. But that's about it at this point in time. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments. And I upload once a month, and we make some awesome stuff here. So I will see you guys in next month's video. Have a great month. Bye-bye.